Moving into Module 7, the first lesson is on arithmetic sequences. Now, you have already done a lesson on arithmetic sequences when the rules were given to you and you were asked to find the first four terms or the 73rd term or things like that. In this lesson, you are going to be given enough information to write the rules for them. So it's opposite of what we have been doing. So just a refresher, an arithmetic sequence has the same difference between consecutive terms. So you're always adding or subtracting to get to the next term. So we have what's called a common difference, and that is indicated by the letter D in the rules that you will see and write. The constant difference between each term. So what are we adding? What are we subtracting? So if you're subtracting, you're going to have a negative number plugged in there, and if you're adding, it'll be a positive. And then just a refresher here, a recursive rule is one that you're given the first term of, and it defines the nth term by relating it to the previous term. So remember, the recursive rule is the one that we couldn't ask you to find the 150th term of without knowing the 149th term. So that's the one you would have to write everything out for. And the explicit rule is the one that you could plug in. If you wanted the 150th term, you could plug 150 in and figure it out. So that's the difference. The recursive rule, you always have the first term given, and then that f of n minus 1. So this part right here, remember, that has to be in the recursive rule, and that indicates the term before. So if we're finding the fourth term, what I circled there would be the number 3, whatever is in the third place. And then we add whatever our common difference is. Now, let's talk about this here. It says for n is greater than or equal to 2. So that is always at the end of a recursive rule. And what that simply means is that you are not going to use this rule to find the first term. It always has to be the second term or higher, because in a recursive rule, the first term is always given to you. So you're not going to use anything, you're not going to plug anything in there. It's just telling you that this is for the second term and higher. All right, and then the explicit rule is f of n, so that's your answer. So in both of them, actually, f of n here, that's your answer. So you're not going to plug anything into that. And then this one says f of 1, which means your first term. And then you're going to add the common difference multiplied by the number of term you're finding minus 1. Okay, so explicit rule is pretty simple there. Once you figure out what you're adding or subtracting, we just plug all of that in and we have our rule. So let me go back up here and label this. The f of n minus 1 in the recursive rule is the previous term. So example 1 says, this table shows the end of the month balances in a bank account that does not earn interest. Write a recursive rule and an explicit rule for the arithmetic sequence described by the table. So for the recursive rule, the first thing we have to say is what the first term is. So f of 1 is 60 in this case, so that needs to be set. Then we have the previous term, which is indicated by f of n minus 1 in the parentheses. And we're going to add the common difference. So what are we adding each time? How do we get to this next number? Well, looking at all of these, we're adding 20. So this would be plus 20. And then you always have to have that for n is greater than or equal to 2. Okay, so when you're writing a recursive rule, always give the first term. And then your equation is going to have that f of n minus 1. And then you're going to add or subtract. If this one was going down, we would put minus, but whatever that common difference is, and then always have this part. That's not going to change at the end for n is greater than or equal to 2, because it's always for the second term or higher. All right, now to write the explicit rule. we are going to have f of 1, which is 60, plus our common difference, which is 20, times n minus 1. So we can plug in whatever we want to find. If we want the 73rd term, we would put 73 in for n, and then do the math, and we would have the 73rd term. Okay, we could put equals f of n here. That would be our answer, and the same thing for this one. Equals f of n, so that's whatever our answer would be. And that's it for writing the rules. So example 2, we're going to do the same thing, only we don't have a story to go along with this list of numbers, we just have a list. So the recursive rule, we always have to give what the first term is. So the first term in this list is 6. And then our formula, our answer, which is f of n, equals, we always have to have that f of n minus 1. That means the previous term. And then we have plus our common difference. So what are we adding or subtracting here? How are we getting to the next number? Looks like we're adding 3 each time. So that's going to be a plus 3. And then we always have to have that for n is greater than or equal to 2, because we want the second term or higher. And then for the explicit rule, we have to have our answer, f of n, equals our first term, which is 6, plus our common difference, which we figured out was 3, and that's going to be multiplied by n minus 1, whatever term we decide to find there. All right, in example 3, the graph shows the cost of a whitewater rafting trip depends on the number of passengers. Write an explicit rule for the sequence of costs. So this is just an explicit rule here. So our generic form of an explicit rule is f of n equals f of 1 plus d times n minus 1. So let's plug in what we know. Well, we know f of n is going to be our answer, so we want that to stay. F of 1 is the first term. So how much does it cost for one person to go? And it looks like $75. So that's going to be 75 plus our common difference. What are we adding each time? What's it going up by each time we add another person? And that would be 25. And then we have n minus 1. So once we decide if we have 12 people going, we can plug 12 in for n, do the math, and figure out how much it's going to cost for 12 people. All right, one more example here that I'm going to give you. So if you're given the explicit rule, f of n equals 3 plus 5 times n minus 1, and you're asked to find the first 4 terms, you are going to plug 1 in, and then 2 in, and then 3 in, and then 4 in to do the math. So the first term, we're going to do 3 plus 5 times 1 minus 1. Well, 1 minus 1 would be 0, and we'd have to multiply that by 5. And 5 times 0 is 0 plus 3, so we would get 3. So our first term would be 3. Then we have to do that again for the number 2. So 2 minus 1 would be 1. Times 5 would be 5, and then plus 3 would be 8. And then our third term would be 3 minus 1 in the parentheses, so that would be 2, and that would be 10 plus 3 is 13. And then our fourth term, that would be a 3, times 5 plus 3 over here. 15 plus 3 is 18. So you can see the pattern. You're adding 5 each time. Now, you could have done that without filling in all of that work. And of course, you probably don't have to write all of that out because those are easy numbers to work with. But if you knew your spots in your formula, you know that's the first term. So you could write a 3. You also know this is the common difference. That's what you're adding or subtracting each time. In this case, it's a plus 5. So I could have taken 3 and then plus 5 and got 8, and plus 5 again, and add 5 again, and keep going like that. So a couple of different ways, as long as you know what is going on with that formula. So you'll have one question like that on your homework, where you have to find the first 4 terms. All of the other questions will be writing the rules.